Hey guys, Stable here. Today we got to look at the Tier 3 Italian Cruiser Giussano. I got Luigi on the screen here. Note Einstein in Inspiration Slot 2. Those of you who aren't familiar with him, he boosts the traverse speed of cruiser main gun batteries significantly. I got him actually at 16.2, so that's a major boost to the traverse speed. This is a tier 3 game. I'm not gonna be covering the ship in depth. We're gonna be talking about traverse speed and how that impacts damage per minute and overall damage per match as this game evolves. So those of you that are a little more advanced players, hopefully will find that interesting. Just going over the Gus briefly. The highlights are the mobility and the concealment. We got almost industry leading at the tier concealment, 8.7 on mine. I mean, comparing it to the Iwaki Ubari, those are both premium Japanese ships, and at least last time I looked at their builds, who knows when that was, they had slightly better concealment than this thing does. But very good concealment, very good mobility, and all looks like the fastest at the tier, or right up in there. Again with the Iwaki. And turn radius 580, that's pretty good. All those tier 3 cruisers usually are pretty mobile. So those are the highlights. Lowlights, gun performance. Reload is atrocious, 14.6 on mine. 30.5 turret traverse. That's with a high level, almost maxed Einstein on there. This is why once I saw these ship stats, I have the tier 3, tier 4 out of the early access crates. Once I started playing a couple games with these, I was like, oh my god, turret traverse is an issue. Put some points into that Mimbelly character who has the ingenious perk. I like that one. And for a number of reasons. Number one, it tells you if you're being targeted, which, even though some of you guys are kind of snobby about that perk, thinking you're way better, that you don't need that type of information, it still helps you. I don't care who you are. Number two, though, it has great turret traverse boost, which is also a plus. Here's a problem with this ship, though. Taking battleship fire. Here's a Kaiser. We're at about a 45-degree angle there, not perfectly angled, but I don't think you can angle this ship against any battleship. Kaiser's probably got among the lowest caliber guns at the tier. No problem punching through the Citadel at that angle and taking half our health. So even though we're kind of forced to play this kind of like an open water cruiser a lot of times, it's not prototypical open water kiting cruiser, and that's why, because you can't really angle against incoming battleship fire. But here, as we go into this turn here against the Emerald, watch those circles in the center of the screen. You can see the dot right in the center of the screen. That's where we're aiming. Those circles are where the turrets are positioned, and you can see as we turn there, we out-turn the guns. So the guns cannot turn faster than the ship can actually physically turn. So why is that important? Anytime you're playing a cruiser and you're doing a lot of dodging, like we're going to be doing in these type of cruisers, or at least this low tier cruiser playstyle, it's often what you're going to do. The Gus, we don't have smoke. The maps are smaller. It's harder to use island cover. So you're kind of, by default, going to be doing this open water type of stuff a lot of times. The problem with that is, if you're out turning your guns, yes, you're able to dodge the shots quite well. Good speed, good turning ability on this. But if the guns, the turrets are always playing catch up, they're trying to keep on target, but because you're physically turning the ship, the guns are moving around and they can't ever get back on target long enough to shoot. That's a problem. It lowers your overall damage per minute for that particular match. You're going to be tempted to stop midway during your turn to get those shots off. Poorly armored cruisers like this one, when you fall to that temptation, usually your ship will fall victim to the guns themselves and just get sunk very rapidly. So that's a problem. You got to be very disciplined. Make sure you continue to get all the way turned around before you fire. But that's going to cut down on your damage, because the more you turn, the further away from your target the guns are going to be positioned, the longer it's going to take for them to get into position to fire. And every second that your guns are physically turning in this game, they're not firing. Every time your guns are loaded but they're not firing, your overall effective damage per minute, damage per match, however you want to conceptualize it, goes down. Easiest way to visualize this in my mind, take a battleship that fires every 30 seconds. That's the reload, okay? So if that's the case, in a perfect match, you get 2 shots per minute, 15-minute match, 30 shots per round. Yes, you can take one of those off for the opening 30 seconds to get in a position if you want to, but you have 30 seconds of effective, or 30 shots for like a perfectly played match where you're always positioned in terms of your ship's positioning to fire the second those guns are reloaded. Where turret traverse comes into play is when those guns are spinning, you're not firing. And here we got a close range duel with this Jaguar, which frankly he probably would have beat the crap out of me. I was playing him very carefully because I assumed the torps were coming, so we pointed directly at him. Probably launched right before engaging with us because he's sticking with his guns. Most low tier destroyer players would eschew the guns completely and only try and torp you. So this Jaguar is frankly winning this fight straight up. He's probably got better armor, he's got better guns than us at this point in time, and you can see the turret traverse. Once we got those guns pointed on the right hand side of the screen, you know, those back guns were going to take another 30 seconds or so just to get in a position. So quite a dangerous engagement there against that tier 4 Jaguar. Anyway, getting back to our hypothetical, we got 30 shots of potential shots of this battleship, right? Now let's say we got to move our guns from one position to the other. That takes 30 seconds, so that's a full reload cycle where we didn't fire the guns once because they were turning from one position to the other. So we've gone from 30 rounds in this perfect match to 29. And if you spend 3 minutes of game time with those turrets spinning, well, that's 6 shots that you've missed out of. So now we've gone from 30 to 24. So that's why turret traverse is so important. That's why I use gun lock. That's why I strongly advocate gun lock, because the less time that those guns are spinning, the more time they spend in position to fire at the enemy. The faster you actually fire, the higher your effective damage per minute. Most players will just look at their damage per minute numbers and they just say, okay, here's the ship's reload time, you know, and then how many shots we can get off a minute, and then do the math that way. That's the simplified, you know, laboratory damage per minute, effective damage per minute, if that's what you want to call it. That's what I admittedly is calling it for the moment, is how many shots you're actually getting off in real world situations. And when you're spinning, you're not getting those shots off. There's a Nassau, there's Golden Fist. He's trying to get those up our tailpipe. We did get some torps going his way, and that's a good example of torping people that are chasing you. People that are chasing you tend to do it in a straight line, whereas if you're chasing them, they get a little nervous or they do a little bit more dodging in general. So that's why these Japanese cruisers that have rearward firing torps or torpedoes, like in that situation where we're in a kiting situation, we're launching those torpedoes backwards, those are actually higher probability in terms of hit rate than torpedoes launched in other situations. Just kind of a little bit of point there. But getting back to the damage per minute, the turret traverse, underrated. I'm at the point now where I think turret traverse, at least on a lot of ships, is the most important offensive stat. If you want to give me an opportunity to boost the reload by 5% or the turret traverse by 5%, often I'm going to choose the turret traverse. Definitely for cruisers that are going to be moving around a lot and shooting. Japanese, French, a lot of the Russians are going to be doing that. These ones, we'll see how the line develops. Can't really design builds for these low tier cruisers because number one, I don't play them very often once I get the full line unlocked, but number two, they're not that representative of how the line evolves, at least hopefully not, because these two low tier Italians are not that impressive. But based on what's going on here, you know, a mixture of low tier gameplay reality and the low tier Italian cruisers themselves, often you're going to find yourself in these open water gunning type situations. The Gus, we don't have smoke. It's harder to utilize island cover when the maps are smaller. So often running and gunning is kind of your default option. But again, if we can't really protect ourselves with angling, that's a dicey proposition. And then you add on to that horrible church verse where even when we are successfully dodging shots, we're really not returning fire because the guns are spending so much time in transit that we're not doing much damage because of that. That's why these low tier Italian cruisers is kind of challenging. So that's why I have Einstein on this build. We'll see if we tweak that. Maybe if the higher tier Italian cruisers have better church verse, then we'll switch the build, because I'll be designing my builds for those ships that I'll be hopefully playing more than these lower tier ones. But definitely, just based on these ships' performance, the church verse needs addressing. That's why if you don't have Einstein, you might want to give Mimbelli a look. The problem with that option is the guns themselves are so trash that losing out those fire chance boosts, the AP penetration boost, potentially the AP fuse shortener perk if you want to play around with that. I haven't personally found that to be too effective low tier wise, but higher tiers with the 203s that I think those guns evolve into, those might be more, that might be more effective. But Mimbelli, I don't know. I kind of roll my eyes at that option too. So the Italian cruisers, at least the ones that I've played, you kind of had these paradoxical choices to make where here we're using Luigi just to get the AP rolling, because the AP is really the only way we're getting any damage with the tier 3, tier 4. So I'm trying to highlight the ship's ability to get those shells in there, detonate internally, hit the citadels. But to do that, we have to give up on the church verse build that we would get with Mimbelli and Ingenious, so we had to slap Einstein on. It's a complicated process. I guess my takeaway from this video for you guys, that's enough of the Gus. But the point I wanted to make why I chose this game was because we saw a lot of those church verse issues. That's applicable to cruisers, battleships, doesn't really matter what nation. Start thinking about the importance of the church verse. Think about ways to enhance that with your builds, because I think that is a lot more important than most players really give credit for. Anyway, that's a look at the Gus for you guys. Hopefully you guys did enjoy it. If you did, please hit the thumbs up. New to the channel, consider subscribing. Lots of World of Warships coming all the time. Questions, comments, leave them below. Love to hear from you guys. And we'll see y'all later. Alright, peace.